Welcome, Dr. Tharoor.
Thank you, Rahul. Good to be with you.
Yeah. So, who is Dr. Shashi Tharoor?
You're seeing him right here. What can I say? I'm, a human being with a number of responses to the world I see around me. Some of which I manifest in my work as an MP and as a politician. Some I manifest in my writing, my articles, my books, and some I manifest in my speeches and my public life. So all of these things are part of the same person. And that's simply a person who's, I'd like to think, a concerned human being.
Yeah. So, which is the favorite part, according to you, within you?
Look, I don't know. I think every little bit of that is me. Otherwise, I would not be a contented human being. In many ways, I've, at various stages of my life, been told by well-meaning friends that I should give up one thing and focus on another. They say, why do you want to work at the UN? Why don't you just focus on politics? I beg your pardon, on writing. Or somebody would tell you, why don't you give up politics and just focus on your writing? But I find that the writing in itself is extremely pleasurable for me. It's in many ways the time that I feel most complete within myself. But writing alone doesn't solve any problems. You can at the most provide diagnoses and prescriptions, but somebody else would have to read them and take action. I like being in the world of conclusions as well as the world of decisions, the world of action as well as the world of analysis.
Yeah, great. You had a long career in UN. So then you came back to India, then you joined politics, you became a minister. So if you see the main objective of Indian Students' Congress, so our motto is to use our expertise gained abroad for the betterment of country, our homeland.
Excellent.
Can you cite an example when you used your expertise, you gained it abroad, you used it back in India, whether when you are as an MP or minister?
Well, I think in many ways, I can give you example after example, but one example would be when I was minister in the Foreign Affairs Ministry, and we had to receive a delegation of a French African country, that is a country in Africa that's Francophone. And nobody in the entire visiting delegation could speak anything other than French. And fortunately, I had been quite fluent in French over my years at the UN. And so I was able to conduct the entire meeting in French and translate for my senior colleagues as well of what the other side was saying. And we had an entire evening and dinner in that way, which was quite amusing. But I think I have to thank my international experience for making that possible.
Yeah, so the minister was an official translator for his colleagues.
That's okay. It's a pleasure. And in fact, we in India ought to, I think, give a little more importance to languages like French and Spanish than we're currently doing. Our Foreign Service has spent a lot of time and focus and energy on learning Russian and Chinese. But French, Spanish, German, Italian, very limited range and proficiency. And in fact, I remember once when I was not in the foreign ministry or even in Indian politics, when I was contesting for Secretary General of the UN, we had a meeting with the President of Senegal, which is a French-speaking country. And it was a similar situation where the Secretary of the Ministry from India didn't speak French. The Joint Secretary handling West Africa didn't speak French. And the ambassador in Senegal, whom we had sent, herself didn't speak French. So of the 4 Indians in the room, there I was, the only one who could actually speak French to the president, which actually was awkward for them because the entire meeting was conducted inevitably in French.
If we come to your parliamentary life, so recently you made a parliament question about the employability of Indian engineers.
Yeah.
Who is actually responsible? Parents, the governments, or the colleges?
No, I think everyone. I think parents are responsible because they keep pressing their children to study engineering, whether the children are interested or not. This is an Indian... a besetting weakness of Indian parents is that engineering and medicine are considered the passports to success, security and so on, and therefore they keep pressing their kids without looking at the kids' interest and talent or anything else. You ask about the educational system. I would say that our system is also at fault, that we have completely divorced learning from employability. I mean, when I was in the government in the HRD ministry, in a different area, polytechnics, we said you will not get a permission to open a polytechnic anywhere in India unless you have an affiliation to an actual contemporary institution that manufactures or works in something within 30 kilometers of your polytechnic.
Okay.
Otherwise, what are you going to teach them? You can't teach practical work out of a textbook and out of a lecture, probably delivered by a teacher who last learned something 30 years earlier. It just doesn't work in today's world. So we want that connection to be much more present, and that's also a failure, I think, in our system.
So in Lok Sabha, there are 21 doctorate holders, 39 professional postgraduates, 57 professional graduates. So do you think this number is sufficient, or what are the measures we can take to increase it? Especially you are the chairman of Indian Professional Congress.
Personally, I would love to see people with higher education qualifications and better professional qualifications across our country and certainly in our parliament. But in practice, you can't prescribe something like this, Rahul. The fact is that politics, and particularly electoral politics, is about electability and not qualifications. So to get into parliament, you need to persuade a majority of people in your constituency to vote for you. Now, however well qualified you are, if you don't have the personal qualities that appeal to voters, it doesn't matter if you have 10 PhDs, you won't get elected. Conversely, you could be an 8th class dropout or a 10th class dropout and still have the grassroots connect to win an election. And in a democracy, no one has the right to sit outside prescribing that one or the other is the only kind of person we want. Politics will have room for everyone.
So like another interesting data, in the current Lok Sabha, there are only 3 members below the age of 30, 17 members between 30 and 35, and for the sake of argument, if we consider the members between the age 35 and 40, we can add another 34. So in total, 54 out of 502 entries, that's what I found in Lok Sabha website.
543 altogether, but that's 10% or under?
Yeah, less than 10%.
40,
so the youth are underrepresented. So
I agree. And I've been quite frustrated about this, particularly because we are already a youth majority country. India today is over 50.1% under 25 and 65% under 35. So there is no question that it's a majority of young people in our country being represented by a majority of old people. And that simply, I think, is unsustainable. I have tried to introduce a private member's bill in which we are reserving, in my recommendation, a certain number of seats for people, MPs under 30, and we would remove the age restriction. Right now you have to be 25 to contest. I said, if you are old enough to vote at 18, why can't you contest from 18? Let's really open up the space so we can bring some more energy and idealism from the young into our legislative assemblies and our parliament. But it's a long shot, and needless to say, those who are already there are the ones who are most resistant. We have seen in our own politics, you and I both from Kerala, that there was a generation which came to power in their 30s and early 40s. Today they're in their 70s and 80s and they're showing no hurry to leave. That is human nature to some degree. But it does make it difficult for the next lot of people of the younger age group to feel they have access to the very positions that are deciding their future and their political destiny.
For example, Dr. Tharoor, like we have 2 houses, the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. So why political parties cannot decide, let the elderly people or the experienced leaders go to Rajya Sabha, and let's give chance for the young leaders in Lok Sabha. So there can be an excuse like the young leaders are inexperienced. So you can of course have a system to guide them. So why not?
My short answer is the same as the ones I've already given you, which is that everything depends on whom the public want to elect. If some electorate, for whatever reason, wants to be represented by a 75 or 80-year-old man or woman, that is their prerogative. Unless, of course, that person's party refuses to nominate them, which is also a possibility. Otherwise, I think they have the right to say, sorry, we're going to absolutely not deny you the right to be represented by a person of your choice. But I think young people should have the possibility and not be barred from trying. And once they have the possibility, let them prove their worth.
Like if we come to the present situation in India, so there is a paradigm shift in the idea of nationalism from Nehru to Modi era. So the first one was celebrated by all the sections of the society, and which was like an inclusive one. So today's one is an exclusive one where Indians are getting visa to Pakistan for just criticizing the government and the ruling party. Why did this happen and what went wrong in the idea of nationalism and what is the reason for that?
I don't think anything has gone wrong. I think there is a distorted idea of nationalism and national loyalty that is being promoted by our present government, which is not my idea, is not the Congress Party's idea, and is not the idea of most intellectuals and thinkers who studied and written about nationalism. The BJP has made a very serious logical error in conflating the Prime Minister with the ruling party. The ruling party is the government is the nation, and therefore criticism of any of these three, the Prime Minister, the ruling party or the government, is anti-national. Now that kind of logic, I think in Germany where you study philosophy, I think almost from kindergarten, I think people will tell you this is completely flawed logic. But that is the assumption on which this government has tended to make legitimate criticism as somehow a betrayal of national interest. That is not true. And merely because they have a majority in parliament today or yesterday doesn't mean that everything they decide is always right. In a democracy, the whole point is you should have other points of view being heard, and sometimes the point of view represented by the minority may actually be the correct point to be taken seriously into consideration. When you look at something like, to take a random decision, demonetization, it's a disastrous decision. But even though we were able to point out all the flaws in advance, and they turned out to be, our pessimism about it turned out to be right, they were completely unmoved, because from their point of view, they had the majority, they could do what they liked. But the fact that 100 people lost their lives in the process, that literally various businesses, small and micro enterprises shut down, so many things went wrong. And they claim this, so they have the right to do what they consider national interest, and criticizing them as anti-national, that doesn't work. And particularly when it comes to issues of national security, it's much easier for the government to wrap itself in the flag. But I have to say that I'm not at all convinced that the government has a monopoly of wisdom on that or any other subject. And in any democracy, it must be open to other points of view and to legitimate criticism.
So, but do you really think a day will come that Indians will realize that they did wrong by accepting this religious nationalism as a substitute to the constitutional nationalism?
Well, I don't think the Indian public has accepted that. I mean, Mr. Modi is in power with 37% of the vote. Yes, he's got a very strong majority of seats, but 37% of the vote means a majority of Indian people have not bought into his agenda. Secondly, of those 37%, there are definitely some who voted for him for other reasons, either national security or certain perceptions of certain economic welfare benefits, gas cylinders, toilets, that sort of thing, rather than it being a case of their voting because of Hindutva. So I am not at all convinced that a message of bigotry, of intolerance, of contempt and impatience with minorities, that message, I don't believe in any way is a majority sentiment in India. And certainly we in the Congress Party must continue to stand up for the values forged in the freedom struggle, which created for us the Constitution, which is really of one country for everybody. That's the value in which we have to.
See the opposition votes. So the opposition votes are divided into n number of political parties, and any attempt to make these or bring these parties under one umbrella is a solution. So do you think such a solution will emerge in nearly future, or the people will naturally elect Congress Party alone in the national?
That's a very artificial way of doing things. In fact, there was one occasion when it was tried, which was immediately after the emergency, when all the opposition parties felt there was such a threat to democracy that they got together and merged into the Janata Party. And as a result, they won that election of 77. But by late 78, they had begun to split, and by 79 it was over and a new election had to be called. Because when parties of such different backgrounds, ideological orientations and convictions come together merely out of electoral exigencies, eventually the things that divided them in the first place will arise again, will re-emerge. So I don't think that such a solution works. What could work is for the parties to retain their individual identities, but to come to more electoral understandings in every state. If, for example, we had a joint agreement amongst all the parties that in every constituency we would only put forward a candidate on behalf of the party which seems to have the best chance of winning. Now, the problem there is going to be that somebody has to make an objective decision. But it may mean, for example, that in UP, the Congress will step aside in the bulk of the constituency because Samajwadi or BSP might be stronger. In Bengal, Trinamool might be stronger. But in Karnataka, Congress may be stronger everywhere. In Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Congress may be stronger anyway to resist the BJP. If they could take such an objectively courageous stand, every party retains its own identity, does its own thing, but supports the strongest opposition candidate, then I think we would have a different result.
If we think about the youth, so many are proud to say that I am apolitical. So do you really think someone can be apolitical, or what is your message to such apolitical youth?
Well, I think they're being foolish. Not because I'm a great fan of party politics per se, because parties also tend to be insufficiently internally democratic. But if you believe in democracy, if you believe in freedom of expression, if by studying at university you're developing your intellectual and critical faculties, why would you want to abdicate the right to have a say in the destiny of your nation? That's what politics is ultimately all about. There's a line I'm perhaps excessively fond of using when young people say this to me. I say, don't tell me you're not interested in politics, because whether you like it or not, politics is interested in you. And the decisions that politicians make will affect your life. It'll affect what sort of possibilities are available to you after college. It'll affect what kind of job opportunities, how many taxes you pay, what kind of social environment you live in, what kind of security you have around you. All of these factors are being decided by the politicians. So whether you like it or not, if you don't take an interest in politics, you are the loser.
So you are always a part of the politics. So I have a question from environment related issue. So you know the recent flood, landslides, the Western Ghats and the Cadre committee report. So what should be our priority, nature or what by politics?
It's a very tough one, that one, because I can tell you that right now my own party is divided. Right now the president of the 𝒃𝒊𝒂 Congress Committee has openly come out saying we have to review our stand on the Kasturirangan and Gadgil reports, that we really must put the environment first. Whereas people representing, if you like, the voters of those areas are saying don't rush to judgment, let us see what can be done in order to preserve people's rights as well. It's a very tough call, because ultimately democracy caters to those who have votes, and only human beings have votes. Trees don't have votes, animals don't have votes. Nature is all around us, but there is a perception that we can bend it to our will. What the floods and landslides and disasters have shown us is that it is this attitude that has led to not just climate change, but the devastating consequences of climate change. At the same time, in any democracy, voters and politicians think about the next election. So don't ask me to give you a magic formula, there isn't one. My own view is we have to try and be extremely sensible and visionary in our approach. And one possibility, which I had recommended to the Chief Minister last year after the devastating floods, is to do a very serious long-term plan, including what they call floodplain mapping, showing where water could flow in the event of future rains, where landslides could happen. And then the state should invest money in moving people, in saying to them, if you live here, we cannot be guaranteeing your safety. Our advice to you is give up your land to the state. We promise you nobody else is going to go and live there. We won't allow anyone else to live there. We will find you equivalent land somewhere else. We'll give you money for you to build something else. Please let us clear this and leave it to nature. That kind of thing takes a lot more political courage than most governments have. So I don't know if it's going to happen.
If you go to your YouTube videos, so if you go to the comment section, so you can see so many comments. India needs more politicians like you. Congress should put him as the next PM candidate. He's the right candidate to become the next Prime Minister. Shashi Tharoor should be the Congress candidate. It's the same. I'm a Modi supporter, but no one beats Mr. Tharoor. So when you will become the Prime Minister?
It doesn't work that way. No, the fact is that, I have a realistic idea of the possibilities in India. Within my party, I don't really see a route to being considered in that sort of thing, and I don't hold it against anybody.
Yeah.
The system is what it is. For the longest time, our leadership was in the hands of Sonia Gandhi ji, who herself chose not to be Prime Minister and nominated somebody else. Subsequently, we had Rahul Gandhi, who has stepped aside right now. What I suggested to the parties, have an election. Let it be opened up to our candidates to put themselves forward. There are bright young people, there are others. Part of the challenge for someone like me would be that in the opposition, the president of the opposition party has to spend an awful lot of time on organizational work. And I have to be honest enough and say, I don't think that's my strength. My strength is going to be in speaking in Parliament and advising on policies and advocating certain principles and values of our party. And those I'm best suited to continue doing in Parliament after having won my seat for the third term. So my gut instinct at this point is to leave it to others. But let's see what process happens at the moment. As you know, Sonia Gandhi's back is acting. And no electoral process has been announced. So for now, we just have to watch and wait.
But when you talk about this electoral process inside the party, so we know the Communist Party or the BJP, so they have a very clear cadre nature. So don't you think we should have a cadre nature?
Well, we do at a more limited level. The communists have it at all levels, whereas in our case, where we would have an electoral college that is credible is when you look at the expanded AICC that includes the PCC delegates. That's about 10,000 people. 10,000 people whose names, ID numbers, electoral card numbers, mobile numbers are all available, so there's no question of anything fake in the election. Give them a chance. They're all party workers. They're party workers who stood the test of time over the years. Let them be the ones to do the election. The problem I know from previous experiences with a broader election within the party is very frankly that suddenly powerful leaders will sign up a whole lot of theoretical party workers overnight, and you get all sorts of characters voting. So the result often reflects other things than genuine popularity in the party. But here you've got established list of party workers built up in a very systematic way. And I think that would be the work of the electoral college for such an election.
Yeah, again, I'm coming back to one more comment. So this is actually in our mother tongue. So Shashi ennu perullavude eka ashwasam. He will explain it in English. So what do you have to comment on that?
Shashi ennu perunnu parnal nammade Chandran.
Ningalkariam, maybe you can explain it in English. So
the question you were asking was about my name. In India, most names have meanings, and Shashi actually refers to the moon, but more specifically to the crescent moon on Shiva's forehead. Lord Shiva is actually someone who has lent himself to many, many names, including the name Shiv and various other names for Indians. But Keralites are particularly fond of two names that come from the moon on his forehead. One is Chandrasekhar, or Chandran is often the version. My father was called Chandran, and I was called Shashi. And one of the reasons that Keralites like that name, I think, is because of fondness for nature and the moon and so on, and perhaps less so because of excessive devotion to one particular god, because Keralites are very eclectic in their interpretations of Hindu faith and so on. But so he was asking, so what are my feelings as a bearer of a name like Shashi? What are my consolations and reliefs and so on? The truth is that ashwasam onnu pratyekich pinne theriyumilla. Namukku Shashi ennu peru vechittu കേരളത്തിൽ നിൽക്കാൻ ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടില്ലെങ്കിലും വിദേശത്ത് പോകുമ്പോൾ വലിയൊരു പാടായിരുന്നു. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് പിന്നെ വെസ്റ്റേൺ ലോകത്തിൽ, അമേരിക്കയിലും ഇംഗ്ലണ്ടിലും ഒക്കെ ഈ ഇങ്ങനൊരു വവലുകൊണ്ട് അവസാനിക്കുന്ന ഒരു പേര് അവർ വിചാരിക്കും പെണ്ണിൻ്റെ പേരെന്നെ ആയിരിക്കും. അപ്പോൾ ഹലോ ദിസ് ഇസ് ശശി എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അവരെൻ്റെ ശബ്ദം കേട്ടിട്ട് ചിരിക്കും ചില സെക്രട്ടറിമാർ. അതിനാണ് എനിക്ക് എല്ലാം വെച്ച് കഷ്ടമാണ്. ഞാൻ ആക്ച്വലി ജനിച്ചപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് ഒന്ന് രണ്ട് മിഡിൽ നെയിമും ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ബർത്ത് സർട്ടിഫിക്കറ്റ് ഇപ്പോൾ കൂടി ഉണ്ട്. ഞാൻ ഇടയ്ക്കിടയ്ക്ക് വിചാരിച്ചു എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഞാൻ ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു മിഡിൽ നെയിം എടുക്കാത്തത്, എന്തിനാണ് ഞാൻ ശശി എടുത്തത് വിചാരിക്കാറ്. പക്ഷെ അവസാനത്തിൽ ഹൈസ്കൂളിൽ ഈ മൂന്ന് പേരിൽ ഒന്ന് ചൂസ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് എൻ്റെ ഫുൾ നെയിം ആക്കിക്കുന്നത്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എല്ലാ സർട്ടിഫിക്കറ്റ്സിനും പാസ്പോർട്ടൊക്കെ വലിയ പാടാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ ശശി തരൂർ ആക്കി. ഇനി അത് പെട്ടു, ഇനി എല്ലാവരും പഴകി. പക്ഷേ പല ഭാഗത്ത് കേരളത്തിൽ ശശി തരൂരിൻ്റെ ഒരു വാക്ക് പോലെയാണ് ആൾക്കാർ സംസാരിക്കുക.
It became a brand actually.
Sort of, yeah, I hope so.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tharoor, for...
Thanks, Rahul. Looking forward to addressing the students today
Yeah, thank you so
here
much.
in Göttingen University. Good to be with you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.